Imagine a civilization so advanced they had indoor plumbing, three-story palaces, and a navy that controlled the Mediterranean 3,500 years ago. Then, in what may have been the most catastrophic natural disaster in human history, they vanished almost overnight. The Minoans built Europe's first maritime empire, and nature destroyed it so completely that we forgot they ever existed until 1900. Welcome back to Hidden Past History, where we dig up the incredible stories that somehow got buried in time. Today we're traveling back to the Bronze Age, to an island in the Mediterranean where a civilization flourished that was more advanced than anything Europe would see again for over 1,000 years. While most of Bronze Age Europe was still living in mud huts, the Minoans were building multi-story palaces with sophisticated drainage systems, creating art that still takes our breath away, and commanding trade routes that stretched from Egypt to Britain. They were the first true maritime superpower, and they did it without massive armies or brutal conquests. But their story ends with one of the most devastating natural disasters in recorded history, an event so catastrophic it may have inspired the legend of Atlantis itself. This is the rise and fall of the Minoans, Europe's first lost civilization. The Minoan civilization emerged around 2700 BCE on the island of Crete, perfectly positioned to control Mediterranean trade routes. But here's what blew archaeologists' minds when they first uncovered these ruins. The Minoans had figured out something that most civilizations never did: how to get rich without making enemies. While their neighbors were busy building massive walls and stockpiling weapons, the Minoans were doing something completely different. At their capital of Knossos, archaeologists found a palace complex covering over 13,000 square meters, that's bigger than 2 football fields, rising 4 stories high. But here's the shocking part: no fortification walls, no weapon stockpiles, no military barracks. Instead, they found frescoes of dolphins leaping through crystal blue waters, young athletes performing death-defying bull-leaping stunts, and elaborate religious ceremonies that look more like festivals than warfare. Think about this. While most Bronze Age Europeans were still figuring out basic pottery, the Minoans had ships crossing the Mediterranean like ancient highways. We're talking about vessels so advanced that Minoan pottery shows up in pharaohs' tombs in Egypt, in British settlements, and everywhere in between. They weren't just trading. They were the Amazon of the ancient world, delivering luxury goods across 3 continents. But here's where it gets really wild. Their society was unlike anything we'd see again for thousands of years. Women weren't just allowed to participate in society, they were running it. Minoan frescoes show female priests conducting religious ceremonies, women athletes competing in dangerous sports, and what appear to be female rulers making important decisions. This was 3,500 years before women's suffrage, and the Minoans had already figured out gender equality. And then there's their technology. Prepare to have your mind blown. The palace at Knossos had running water and flush toilets in 1600 BCE. Let that sink in. These people were using indoor plumbing, while the rest of Europe wouldn't figure it out for another 2,000 years. They had a ventilation system so sophisticated it kept their massive palaces cool without air conditioning. They built Europe's first paved roads and developed metallurgy so advanced that their tools were sharper and stronger than anything their neighbors could produce. Picture this empire at its peak around 1600 BCE. Minoan ships dominating every trade route, their peaceful influence extending across the entire Aegean Sea, and their capital city featuring technology that wouldn't be seen again until Roman times. They had cracked the code of how to build an empire without violence, and it was working perfectly. Then the Earth itself decided to end their story. Then came the disaster that would make every modern catastrophe movie look tame by comparison. Just 70 miles north of Crete, the volcanic island of Thera began showing signs of unrest around 1600 BCE. But this wasn't going to be just another volcanic eruption. This was going to be geological Armageddon. When Thera finally exploded, It unleashed a force that makes our most powerful nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. We're talking about an eruption 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa, the 1883 blast that killed 36,000 people and was heard 3,000 miles away. The Thera eruption shot a column of ash and rock 25 miles straight up into the sky, so high it reached the stratosphere. The sound of the explosion was heard across 3 continents, and the ash cloud was so thick it turned day into night for weeks. But here's the terrifying part. The explosion was just the opening act. When that much volcanic material gets blasted into the air, it has to come down somewhere. And when it hit the ocean, it displaced millions of tons of water, creating a tsunami that raced across the Mediterranean at 450 miles per hour. Picture walls of water over 100 feet high, taller than the Statue of Liberty, slamming into the northern coast of Crete, where most Minoan cities were located. These weren't just big waves. They were liquid mountains moving faster than a Formula One race car. Entire coastal settlements were erased in minutes, swept away like sandcastles. The archaeological evidence is bone-chilling. At Akrotiri on Santorini, we found an entire Minoan town preserved under volcanic ash like a Bronze Age Pompeii. The scene tells a story of desperate evacuation, pottery still sitting on tables, tools dropped mid-use, wet plaster on walls that never dried. The people had just enough warning to run for their lives, but they couldn't save their civilization. And the nightmare wasn't over. The massive amount of ash and sulfur dioxide pumped into the atmosphere created what scientists call a volcanic winter. Global temperatures dropped, crops failed worldwide, and the sun was blocked out for months. The carefully maintained trade networks that had sustained Minoan prosperity for over 1,000 years were shattered overnight. The Minoans survived the immediate disaster, but their golden age was over forever. Their magnificent fleet was destroyed, their ports were buried under ash and debris, and the trade networks that had made them wealthy were completely disrupted. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Minoans were vulnerable, and their enemies noticed. Enter the Mycenaean Greeks from mainland Greece, warriors who had been watching Minoan prosperity with envy for generations. These weren't peaceful traders like the Minoans. They were Bronze Age Vikings who had built their entire society around conquest and military might. Seeing Crete weakened, they moved in like sharks, sensing blood in the water. By 1450 BCE, just 150 years after the eruption, Mycenaean warriors had taken control of the island. The transformation was brutal and swift. The Minoans found themselves strangers in their own homeland, their peaceful culture gradually absorbed by their militaristic conquerors. Watching this cultural destruction must have been heartbreaking. Linear A writing, the Minoan script we still can't fully decipher, vanished, replaced by Mycenaean Linear B. The vibrant naturalistic art that had covered palace walls was painted over with rigid Greek geometric patterns. The sophisticated engineering knowledge that had created indoor plumbing and advanced ventilation systems was gradually forgotten. Here's what keeps historians awake at night. Europe wouldn't see indoor plumbing again for over 1,000 years. Advanced metallurgy, sophisticated ship design, even the concept of gender equality, all of it was lost. The Minoans had achieved technological and social advances that were centuries ahead of their time, and when their civilization collapsed, humanity essentially had to start over. But here's where the story gets really intriguing. The sudden disappearance of this advanced maritime civilization may have echoed through history in ways we're only beginning to understand. Some scholars believe the Minoan catastrophe inspired Plato's legend of Atlantis, a powerful island civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single day. The parallels are striking: an advanced maritime empire, superior technology, and sudden destruction by natural forces. The ripple effects extended far beyond Crete. Minoan trading posts throughout the Mediterranean were abandoned, and the collapse of their trade networks contributed to instability that affected civilizations from Egypt to Anatolia. The Bronze Age world had lost its most sophisticated civilization, and the consequences were felt everywhere. The story of the Minoans teaches us profound lessons about the relationship between human civilization and natural forces. Here was a society that had seemingly mastered their environment. They had advanced technology, sophisticated governance, and a sustainable approach to power that avoided the destructive warfare that plagued other Bronze Age civilizations. Yet nature proved stronger than human ingenuity. A single geological event undid over 1,000 years of cultural development and technological advancement. The Minoans remind us that even our most sophisticated civilizations remain vulnerable to forces beyond our complete control. But their story also reveals the importance of cultural preservation. The Minoans made remarkable innovations in art, engineering, and social organization. Their peaceful approach to building an empire through trade rather than conquest was revolutionary. When their civilization collapsed, much of this knowledge was lost to history. It's worth considering what we might learn from their approach. In our modern world, where conflicts often dominate headlines, the Minoans demonstrated that prosperity and influence could be built through cooperation and exchange rather than domination and war. Their maritime empire lasted longer than many built on military might. The rediscovery of Minoan civilization also shows us how much of our past remains hidden. Until archaeologist Arthur Evans began excavating Knossos in 1900, the Minoans existed only in Greek legends and Egyptian records. Their magnificent palaces, advanced technology, and sophisticated art had been completely forgotten. This makes us wonder, what other lost civilizations might be waiting to be rediscovered? How many times has human knowledge been lost to natural disasters, warfare, or simply the passage of time? The Minoans remind us that progress isn't always linear. Sometimes humanity takes steps backward before moving forward again. Their legacy lives on in the civilizations that followed. Greek mythology preserves echoes of Minoan culture, and their artistic innovations influenced Mediterranean art for centuries. Most importantly, they proved that advanced civilization was possible. They lit a torch that would eventually be carried forward by the Greeks, Romans, and ultimately to us. The Minoans built one of history's most impressive civilizations, only to have it destroyed by forces beyond their control. What do you think we can learn from their story? Could our modern civilization be just as vulnerable to natural disasters? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how you think the Minoan experience relates to our world today. If you're fascinated by lost civilizations, there are so many more incredible stories waiting to be explored. Should we dive into the mysterious sea peoples who helped end the Bronze Age? Or perhaps explore the advanced Indus Valley civilization that disappeared without a trace? Let us know which forgotten empire you'd like us to uncover next. And if you enjoyed this journey into Europe's hidden past, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're constantly discovering forgotten stories of remarkable civilizations that somehow slipped through the cracks of history. Until next time, keep exploring the hidden past, because the most incredible stories are often the ones that have been forgotten.